Imagine stepping into a tomb untouched for 4,000 years. Your flashlight catches the gleam of gold, a death mask staring back at you with lifeless eyes. Beneath it lies a linen-wrapped body, no older than 16. But what grips your heart isn't the darkness or the silence. It's the realization this boy didn't die from illness or violence. He died from the very blood that made him royal. His parents were siblings, so were their parents, and theirs before them. Each breath he ever took was a silent rebellion against the twisted legacy he inherited. Born a living god but betrayed by his own body. His spine bent unnaturally. His bones weakened. At 16, he shuffled through golden corridors with a cane while whispers trailed behind him like shadows. He didn't know the word genetics, but he knew suffering. He knew isolation. Everyone called his condition sacred. Every visible flaw became a so-called blessing. The palace didn't see disease, they saw divinity. They mistook inherited agony for holiness. Paradise in truth was nothing more than a velvet-lined tomb. And here's the chilling truth, this isn't legend. This is what really happened. For 3,000 years, Egypt's most exalted rulers, seen as living gods, conducted a silent, unintentional genetic trial. Not in pursuit of knowledge or healing, but in the name of purity. They believed their blood carried divine essence too sacred to mingle with ordinary people. So generation after generation, siblings married siblings, again and again. The result, centuries of inherited pain woven into gold-threaded robes and sung through temple hymns. But to understand the origins of this tragedy, we must go back to the first king who looked at his sister not with affection, but with obligation. Only she, he believed, could preserve the god within. His court approved, his priests exalted him. No one dared ask what price his descendants might pay. Pharaohs weren't merely rulers. They were incarnations of the gods, avatars of Ra, sons of Horus. How could a being of celestial blood take a mortal wife? The logic seemed divine, so brothers married sisters not out of love, but out of reverence. What began as devotion became dogma. Egyptian royals were raised with this mandate as destiny, and with each union the invisible damage deepened. At first the signs were dismissed. A narrow jaw, divine elegance, elongated skull, a crown-worthy trait, a limp, perhaps a spiritual mark. Priests reframed every warning as a miracle. They didn't see the spiral, they sanctified it. Until one family took this tradition to its most brutal conclusion. In 1353 BCE, under Egypt's sun-drenched skies, a child was born. He would become Akhenaten, the pharaoh who defied God's traditions and even art. But long before his revolutions, he was just a boy in a body that betrayed the myth of divinity. His skull stretched oddly. His hips were wine and feminine. His chest swelled with unnatural softness. His movements were awkward. His voice strange. Servants bowed low but couldn't meet his gaze. Courtiers smiled with tight lips. His parents, also brother and sister, looked upon him and whispered, "He is touched by the gods." In truth, he bore the full weight of generations. When he took the throne, he did something unthinkable. He told artists to abandon idealism. He demanded truth. The royal family was to be painted as they were misshapen, distorted real. What scholars call an artistic revolution was in fact the first visual documentation of inherited genetic damage. He and his wife Nefertiti had 6 daughters. Whispers suggest sons, none survived. The children in the murals share the same features, the same strange heads, the same fragile limbs, painted as divine but born into decay. Perhaps in desperation, Akhenaten turned to a new god, Aten the sun disk. He built a new capital, Amarna far from Thebes and its ancient temples. A new god, a new city, a new hope, but no god could rewrite DNA. The royal family isolated themselves further physically and genetically. The city, brilliant in vision, became a desert prison. Akhenaten died young. His city vanished into sand. His name was scrubbed from monuments. But his legacy lived on in his son. In 1341 BCE, a frail child was born. His name would echo through history, Tutankhamun. He ascended the throne at 9, but behind the regalia was a broken child. His foot twisted inward, his back curved, his chest caved unnaturally. Standing hurt. Sitting was worse. Breathing was a struggle. Yet priests chanted his strength. Artists immortalized his glory. Servants dressed him in gold while helping him walk with canes. Over 130 walking sticks would be buried with him, not symbols of rule, but crutches of necessity. He married his half-sister. Their children were never born alive. Their tiny mummified bodies rest in silence beside their father's tomb, witnesses to a dynasty cursed by its own customs. Tutankhamun's portraits were stylized. They disguised frailty with grandeur, but behind the paint and pomp, his immune system failed. A mosquito bite carrying malaria proved fatal. His death should have been an end. Instead, it was a beginning. When Howard Carter discovered his tomb in 1922, the world saw splendor. But decades later, DNA told the real story. Tutankhamun was a child of incest, his body a vessel of compounded errors worshipped as divine, doomed by lineage. One might hope that this tragedy taught Egypt a lesson. But history, it seems, repeats with stubborn cruelty. Centuries later, after Alexander the Great's empire fractured, one of his generals took Egypt. The Ptolemies, foreign rulers steeped in Greek tradition, saw the temple carvings and thought this is how gods rule. So they too adopted sibling marriage. For 3 centuries, they followed this path. Brother to sister, cousin to cousin. The family tree twisted into a knot of repetition and ruin. The most extreme case of royal inbreeding in recorded history. And from that experiment, a final queen emerged, Cleopatra. Not the Hollywood seductress of smooth skin and flawless form, but a woman shaped by centuries of compounded bloodlines. Her beauty was likely exaggerated, but her brilliance was real. She spoke 9 languages, mastered diplomacy and philosophy. And unlike her ancestors, she looked outside for salvation. Caesar, Antony, these weren't just political choices, they were genetic rescue attempts. She bore children by Roman fathers, children who might have broken the curse. But Rome was merciless. Octavian hunted down her heirs. The line ended not with a whimper, but with a sword. When Cleopatra chose death, she didn't just end a dynasty, she ended a 300-year genetic collapse. But Egypt's tragedy stretches wider than one family. In its long history, royal inbreeding ebbed and flowed. After the Old Kingdom fell, foreign marriages brought fresh genes. The Middle Kingdom flourished. But later rulers drunk on power fell back into old habits. Obsession with bloodline purity returned, and so did the curse. Time and again, dynasties rose with diversity and crumbled with isolation. To understand their pain, forget thrones and crowns. Picture a young royal waking in marble chambers, aching before they stand, surrounded by gold but unable to chew without agony. Revered as divine, yet too weak to play, to run, to live freely. They saw their ancestors in art distorted reflections. And they began to understand they weren't gods. They were victims of a sacred lie. For royal women, childbirth became terror. Every pregnancy a question. Will this child live? Will it suffer? Some queens vanished from public life after repeated losses. Others dulled their pain with wine and opium. Grief became part of the royal lineage. Modern science gives clarity to what ancient minds could not grasp. When siblings reproduce, there's a 25% chance their child inherits double copies of harmful genes. And over generations, these risks don't just remain, they multiply. What begins as slight becomes severe. What once was hidden becomes grotesquely visible. The pharaohs thought they preserved divine purity. In truth, they engineered biological ruin. Their palaces became silent laboratories. Their tombs monuments to the cost of ignoring nature. But their pain was not in vain. If we listen, if we learn, they wanted to be Oz but became the greatest teachers in human history. Their bones whisper louder than any scroll. Their suffering became our science. And as we step from the shadows of their tombs back into our modern light, we carry their final message. Choose compassion over obsession, wisdom over tradition, love over lineage. They could not escape their fate, but maybe we can. The story of ancient Egypt's royal bloodlines is not just a tale of gold and grandeur, it's a warning whispered through time. They had everything palaces power worship, but in chasing the illusion of perfection, they sealed their own decay. They clung to bloodline over wisdom, to tradition over truth, and in doing so, they traded humanity for mythology. What destroyed them wasn't war, it was pride. Their tombs now rest beneath deserts, silent but not forgotten, because inside them lies a message more valuable than any treasure. Purity is not power, control is not divinity, and love, real love, is not afraid to mix, to change, to grow. We live in a different world, a world where science explains what superstition once glorified. But even today, echoes of that ancient arrogance remain in ideologies that fear difference, in systems obsessed with lineage, in voices that still call blood sacred. So let the pharaohs teach us not through their monuments, but through their mistakes. Let their broken bones remind us that the future doesn't belong to the pure. It belongs to the kind, to the open-minded, to those who dare to break the cycle. They ruled the world but couldn't escape themselves. But we can, and that is the true legacy they leave behind.